arrival on the sun-drenched coast. I landed in Málaga on a Wednesday morning that smelled of warm tarmac, strong espresso, and someone else's suntan lotion. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months. Chicago had been choking me. Budgets, deadlines, gray slush by the curbs. I'd booked this solo escape to Marbella on a reckless whim after my divorce papers cleared. Part of me needed salt water. Another part needed to believe I could still be impulsive at 33. An hour later, a sleek black taxi wove along the Costa del Sol toward the hotel. Whitewashed villas clung to cliffs. Bougainvillea spilled over stone walls like pink fireworks. And the Mediterranean flashed silver whenever sunlight ricocheted off its surface. I reminded myself to remember every detail. I'd promised my therapist I'd practice presence instead of scrolling through what-ifs on my phone. The hotel lobby, marble floors, a ceiling that looked like it belonged in a palace, the faint scent of orange blossom, felt almost too grand for one Midwestern woman with wrinkled carry-on clothes. But the concierge smiled and called me Senora Lewis with gentle respect, as if heartbreak were an acceptable passport stamp. After unpacking, I wandered into Marbella's old town. Narrow paved lanes zigzagged beneath wrought iron balconies dripping with geraniums. My first purchase was an unnecessary straw hat from a tiny shop run by a woman who called me Bella. When I tried to insist I wasn't, she tutted in Spanish that beauty was a confidence you either wore or you didn't. I walked out 10 euros lighter, a little bolder, and ready to spend. I sampled Rioja in a shaded courtyard, nibbling olives so plump they burst like miniature water balloons. I bought a silk scarf the color of afternoon rosé. I tasted my first churro dipped in molten chocolate, thick enough to offset 3 months of obsessive calorie counting. By sunset, my shoulders glowed from Andalusian sunshine, my Visa card smoked, and my soul felt a shade brighter. Part 2. The boat called Azul de Medianoche. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, like a kid on the first day of summer camp. My itinerary, planned solely from Pinterest inspiration boards, instructed me to catch a half-day yacht tour along the coast. The booking confirmation called it a boutique sailing experience with artisan tapas and complimentary cava. That was all I needed. Puerto Banús shimmered under 9 a.m. light, bobbing masts, billionaire super yachts, and storefronts displaying watches that cost more than my student loans. I found Azul de Medianoche moored at Slip 12. She wasn't a super yacht. She was better. A classic 60-foot ketch with navy and cream lines, teak rails polished to gleam, sails neatly furled like promise. A tall man in a white polo stood on deck, coiling rope. Dark hair escaped a low bun at his nape, sun-browned skin dusted with salt, and forearms roped in lean muscle. He looked up, and the world took one deliberate heartbeat before it resumed. "Buenos dias," he called, English accent flirting with Andalusian melody. "You must be Miss Lewis. Welcome aboard." I stepped onto the gangplank, pulse louder than any seagull. "Call me Mara," I said. "It's just me today." He extended a hand, rough palms, gentle grip. "Alejandro, crew, or what's left of it. Our captain is below prepping charts, and my brother's fetching fresh ice." He smiled in a way that felt like a warm tide lapping over my ankles. "But for now, I'm your personal deckhand." Personal deckhand. The phrase skittered across my thoughts with dangerous potential. Part 3. Waves, wine, and whatever this feeling is. By 10, we were slicing southward along the coast, mainsails bellying under steady wind. Only 5 passengers had booked. 2 honeymoon couples canoodled at the bow, leaving me the shaded stern couch to myself. Alejandro handled When he called, "Brace yourself," the words felt double-edged, part warning about heel angle, part prophecy of emotional imbalance. He poured my first glass of cava. I tried to sip like a sensible woman, but the bubbles made me giggle against the rim. He raised a brow. "Lightweight." "Optimist," I corrected. "I like believing good things rise to the top." He chuckled, a low, honeyed sound. "Then you'll like sailing. Water has no time for pessimists. Either you trust the horizon, or you stay in port." "Is that a maritime proverb?" "It's an Alejandro proverb," he said. "Feel free to quote me." We shared goat cheese toasts, marinated anchovies, and a tomato salad so sweet it felt indecent. Midway through, the captain announced a swim stop. The couples retreated below deck to change. I stood alone at the ladder, unsure whether I wanted the salt on my skin or to keep my insecurities under wraps. Alejandro sensed the hesitation. "Water's perfect," he said, eyes sincere. "I'll jump first." He dove cleanly, a blade of bronze slicing turquoise. He resurfaced and slicked hair back, calling my name in encouragement. Under the Andalusian sun, fear felt ridiculous. I stripped to my navy one-piece and leapt. The sea cradled me in cool silk. When I surfaced, Alejandro was so close our shoulders brushed. Salt water dripped from his lashes. My breath stalled. He grinned, teeth white against tan. "See, trust the horizon." I floated on my back, heart wild. The sky's blue stretched endless. I realized I was smiling, not for a photo, not for anyone's approval, just because life in that second tasted like possibility. Part 4. Confessions under canvas. After swimming, the other passengers dozed in the sun. Alejandro handed me a towel and motioned toward the bow where the shade awning cast a softer light. We sat cross-legged on deck cushions. He poured us Rioja from a chilled carafe, even though the brochure said cava only. "Captain's ashore in his charts," he winked. "We disobey gently." I learned he was 27, born in Cadiz, studied marine engineering before dropping out to sail full-time. His father died when he was 19. The boat had belonged to him, a fisherman who dreamt of chartering. Alejandro and his older brother rebuilt her over 5 years, naming her Azul de Medianoche, midnight blue, after their mother's eyes. "Selling excursions keeps the dream alive," he said. "But one day, we'll sail farther, Morocco, the Canaries, maybe across to the Caribbean." I confessed my marriage's quiet collapse, how success had felt like a performance review, not a state of being, how I'd stopped recognizing myself in the fluorescent lights of my office cubicle. His gaze never flickered away. "Sometimes," he said, swirling Rioja, "we confuse safety with happiness. They're not always friends." Wind fluttered my still damp hair. My skin smelled of sea. For the first time in years, I believed there could be separate definitions for safety and happiness, and that I deserved both. Part V. Dockside dusk and designer shoes. Back in port, Alejandro offered to walk me through Puerto Banús. I agreed before common sense could object. He wore deck shoes, a linen shirt now unbuttoned to sun-kissed collarbones. I wore the straw hat and courage. We strolled past boutiques, Hermès, Dior, a jewelry store flaunting diamonds like captured starlight. I tried to act worldly, but pressed my Visa card deeper in my purse as if it might break free on its own. Alejandro paused at a window display of espadrilles, hand-stitched blush-pink suede. "Those suit your smile," he announced. "I don't need more shoes." "Needs are overrated," he replied with mischief. Before I could protest, he stepped inside. 10 minutes later, he emerged, box in hand. A memento. "Alejandro, no." He lifted a shoulder. "Staff discount. We refilled their yacht water tanks last week." He placed the box in my arms. considerate interest on the optimism you shared today. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to let myself receive my therapist's voice. Sometimes accepting kindness is an act of bravery. Thank you, I whispered. His answering look, the kind that reaches under skin and rearranges tightly wrapped fears, left me dizzy. Part 6. Barrels of Tempranillo, Barriers of Truth. That evening he texted an invitation, a late-night visit to Bodega Santos, a family-run winery in the hills after tourist hours. His friend managed the cellar. I didn't hesitate. He picked me up on a beat-up motorbike. I straddled the seat, holding his waist longer than necessary. Winding roads carried us to a stone building haloed by moonlight. Inside, oak barrels breathed aromas of blackberry and vanilla. Candles flickered between bottles. The manager discreetly vanished after pouring 2 generous tastings. Alejandro leaned against a barrel, swirling garnet liquid. Shadows carved cheekbones into mysteries. You ever feel, he asked, that your real life is waiting for you somewhere else? All the time. He set down his glass. Show me your real life, Mara. I searched his face. So much openness it hurt. I told him about my sketchbooks hidden in a closet, how I used to paint watercolors before marriage turned art into an indulgence. His expression softened, as if he could see every abandoned hue I described. He told me about storms at sea that had bruised his resolve, how fear tasted metallic, but fear also taught him the shape of gratitude. When he brushed a lock of hair from my jaw, my pulse soared. We kissed in wine-scented darkness, slow, searching, a promise uncorked after years on the shelf. Part 7. The quiet erosion of practicality. Over the next 5 days, Marbella became the backdrop of a romance that unfurled like a bolt of silk across a shop counter. We ate tapas in alleyways, lit by strings of bulbs. We tasted Tinto de Verano on a rooftop bar where guitars strummed below. We wandered through designer boutiques. He insisted I try on a crimson wrap dress just to see the world fall silent. I bought it because it made me fall silent. On day 3, he slipped rose gold hoop earrings into my palm. For that dress, he murmured. I'd never worn hoops larger than a dime, these circled possibilities. I let him latch them. They swung against my neck like yeses, but reality rippled beneath every wave. My return flight loomed. His peak season schedule stretched for months. Money I'd splurged felt less glamorous in late-night mental math. We avoided those facts, sailing instead into moments where time bowed. Part 8. Storms, literal and otherwise. On my final yacht excursion, clouds bruised the horizon. Guests canceled. Only I arrived. Captain's red skies. Still, Alejandro's brother decided we could motor a short loop. We were 20 minutes out when wind whipped sudden and hard. Waves slapped hull, rain-lashed sails. The captain barked instructions. Alejandro secured sheets, muscles straining. I gripped rail, adrenaline singing sharp. The storm was a reminder. The sea, like love, offered beauty at the risk of wreckage. We limped back to harbor drenched but intact. On deck, thunder fading, I saw Alejandro's arm cut and bleeding from a winch. I rushed, pressing towel to the gash. He winced, then laughed softly. Just a scratch, he said, rainwater streaming his lashes. Storms appear without warning, I whispered, not meaning only weather. He cupped my face with his uninjured hand. Then we reef the sails and ride them out. Part 9. Midnight on the breakwater. That night, we sat on the breakwater, city lights mirrored in black water. My suitcase waited in the hotel lobby for a dawn taxi. Departure hovered like a gull circling discarded bread. I could stay longer, I said. Extend the trip. He shook his head gently. Your life is in Chicago. Mine is here, for now. I swallowed disappointment thick as port wine. Then this is goodbye. He traced the line of my jaw. This is hasta luego. See you later, if we choose. I thought of safety versus happiness, of art supplies gathering dust, of how waves didn't beg the shore to stay. They kept arriving anyway. He slipped something into my palm, a weathered brass compass the size of a silver dollar. It belonged to my father, he said, always pointed him home, even when he wasn't sure where that was. Tears blurred everything. Alejandro, you can, amor, because maybe home is a direction, not a place. And maybe this will point you toward whatever comes next. We kissed under scattering stars. When we parted, I tasted the sea on my lips and the future on my tongue. Part X. Waking to the possibility of yes. 6 months later, Chicago winter fenced the city in ice. My corporate contract had lapsed. I'd quit the day I returned, surrendering safety for something still unnamed. I taught watercolor classes on weekends, sold small paintings online, and saved every spare dollar. One morning, a thick envelope arrived, postmarked Málaga. Inside, photos of Alejandro standing aboard Azul de Medianoche, smile broad, a sign reading, Caribbean crossing August 5th, crew applications open. Under the pictures, a note. The horizon's still waiting. Trust it. Come paint the sea from the other side. I pressed the brass compass to my heart. The needle quivered north, but my pulse sailed south. I opened my laptop, Googled volunteer deckhand certifications, and typed an email. Subject, application, crew member willing to learn, can pay in optimism and Rioja. Send. Outside, Lake Michigan groaned under sheets of snow, but in my mind, the Mediterranean shimmered blue, and a young Spaniard's laugh echoed against sails billowing with new beginnings. I smiled to myself, an unposed, unstoppable curve, and reached for my brush. The water in the jar reflected lamplight like moon on calm tide, and I knew, with sudden clarity, that some stories don't end. They keep unfolding as long as we choose to turn the page,